We've had the news in the last 24 hours that PayPal has tabled a bid for Pinterest. We can see that PayPal's stock has been knocked back. So let's take a look at both of these and see where the opportunities might be. I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at both PayPal and Pinterest. Here's the PayPal chart following the news. They've put the bid in for Pinterest. The stock has slid from around 270 down towards 240. If we bring up Pinterest, as is often the case when companies receive takeover offers, we've seen the stock price jump. A few days ago, it was trading around 53. It has so far traded as high as 65. So as usual in this video, I'll talk a bit more about these two companies. Then we'll come back onto the charts and look at things in a bit more detail. Hello, I'm David Jones from Capital.com, and I thought this time round we'd do things slightly different. We'll take a look at two stocks. We'll take a look at PayPal and Pinterest, because just in the last 24 hours or so, news has come out that PayPal has made a bid for Pinterest. So we'll talk about those, and then we'll take a look at their charts, respective charts on the platform. Perhaps PayPal is the more interesting one here, but more about that as we go through. So as usual in this video, I'll talk about some of this recent news, some of the earnings, then we'll get onto the platform and look at the technicals in a bit more detail. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, if you could click on subscribe, it does help support the channel, and it means we can continue to push out lots of different stock videos throughout the week. Right, let's get into it and talk about this PayPal Pinterest potential deal in a bit more detail. So first of all, PayPal, an online payment system that came to the market in 2002. Then it was acquired by eBay. Then it was spun off from a separate company to eBay in 2015. So I think it's a company that plenty of us are familiar with and has been around for some time. And it came out earlier this week that it was in talks to buy the image sharing and social media business. It's sort of like an online scrapbook business, Pinterest. So the deal is, it seems to be a mainly stock-based offer that it's making for Pinterest. So it's swapping PayPal stock. And the offer comes in at around $70 per share for Pinterest. And just to put that into perspective, Pinterest stock this month has traded as low as 50. So we have seen the stock price of Pinterest jump, which of course is not surprising. But interestingly, it isn't really that near to $70 yet. So why is Pinterest of interest to PayPal? Well, it's got something like 450 million users. So there's a big user base there, potentially, that if they're not already using PayPal, could be interested in PayPal's services. But also, Pinterest has been pushing and developing the e-commerce side of its platform recently. So clearly, if there's business and online shopping to be done, then for PayPal, that's very attractive of sitting in there and providing itself as the payments provider. So I think that's clearly something that's of interest to PayPal going forward. So I said that Pinterest stock had risen on the news. Not surprising, when a company receives a takeover approach, its stock will go up. But like I say, isn't yet at $70, the mooted offer price for Pinterest. And PayPal's stock has dropped. PayPal's stock has dropped by around about 10% on the news so far. And again, this isn't abnormal. When companies make an offer for another company, clearly it's an investment and it's a potential risk for the company that's actually doing the takeover. So sometimes we can see, or often see, their stock price drop. But this could still be an opportunity. For if you want to invest in PayPal, the fact it's dropped 10% this week could still be an opportunity. The latest earnings for PayPal came in at the end of July, so that means we're due earnings again later this month. They came in pretty much in line with expectation. The stock has done well. In a second, we'll look at both of the charts. I suppose there's a couple of ways of playing this. You could look at the slide in PayPal. Some may see that as a buying opportunity because the stock has fallen 10%. Pinterest stock has jumped, but hasn't jumped to the rumored bid figure that PayPal have put on the table. So I think there's perhaps, some may think there's a bit more upside there, or also, what can sometimes happen, another bidder comes in and we have perhaps potentially a bidding war. So there's a few different angles, interesting things to watch, I think, over the next few weeks. So to talk about some of the levels to watch for PayPal in particular. I mean, the high we've seen this month came in at $274. After that, we had all-time highs in July at $310. Lots of support on the downside for PayPal. I think the first of these for me, it's a bit of a way away from where we are now, but down at $233, the May lows. But to put a bit more color on these numbers, take a look at both these stocks. Let's jump quickly on the charts. Let's start things off with Pinterest first of all. So in March 2020, the stock had been as low as about $10 and ran all the way up to 90. Fantastic move off those lows. It's been somewhat sideways this year, but you can see the impact the PayPal bid has had. When a company is a potential takeover candidate, there's always the possibility that the company bidding comes in with a higher offer, or perhaps another company gets involved. But I think it can be quite difficult to try and trade or invest around these sort of takeovers. That's why I think perhaps PayPal is the more interesting one here. Let's bring up their chart. So again, looking at the same sort of period, from the March 2020 lows, the stock was around $83. It has briefly traded above $300 so far this year. Knocked quite hard, as you can see, on the news of the bid. But actually, I do wonder if this ends up being something of a buying opportunity. The stock had been, broadly speaking, somewhat sideways since February of this year. But if we take a look at the RSI down here, it has gone oversold on the price being knocked back down. If we look at some of the more recent oversold signals, I suppose they've done a reasonable job of eventually calling a turning point for the stock. But for me, if we go back and look at the chart, perhaps what's more interesting here are the price levels to watch. I said it's been fairly sideways for much of this year, but it has been really well underpinned by, first of all, the sort of the 220 zone from January through to March of this year, and then more recently around 230, the lows that we saw in May, and the next big low for me on the chart. So I think it's an interesting one down at these levels. If a chartist thought that perhaps the stock had been knocked too far on the news of this takeover bid, perhaps it's interesting to look at it as a buying opportunity down here. We often see, as I said, the volatility by the company that's making the bid. As investors think, well, actually, is this the right move for the company? But looking at where it's traded historically, I think PayPal is an interesting one down here above that old support. It's worth keeping an eye on in the days and the weeks ahead. See what happens with this bid. Does PayPal revise it? Does a new bidder come in? All of this sort of stuff. But I think watching the PayPal stock price could be just as interesting, because we have pulled back into what has been big support for the stock for much of this year. That's it for this update. We'll see how it plays out with PayPal and Pinterest, whether PayPal end up buying the company, does someone else come in, what happens to their respective stock prices. We'll do an update. But for now, from me, David Jones and Capital.com, we'll leave things there. Good luck with your investing.
For more trading videos just like this, please subscribe to our channel.